The coffee cup shattered against the boardroom wall 3 inches from Ethan Carter's head. "Get this janitor out of my meeting!" The CEO roared, his face purple with rage. But Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't run. Instead, the quiet single dad in the worn gray coveralls slowly bent down, picked up a marker off the floor, and walked straight toward the $100 million system diagram on the screen. "You just threw coffee at the only man in this room who can save your company," he said softly. "Now sit down." What nobody in that room knew was that this janitor had once designed the very system they were about to destroy. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because the truth about who Ethan Carter really is will leave you speechless. And do me a favor, drop a comment right now telling me which city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. If you believe a good man's worth isn't measured by the clothes on his back, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Let's begin. The 17th floor of Vantage Technologies smelled like money and fear. Ethan Carter pushed his cleaning cart down the east corridor at 6:42 in the morning, the same way he had every weekday for the past 2 years. His coveralls were faded from 1,000 washes. His boots were scuffed at the toe. He was 42 years old, and to almost everyone who passed him in that hallway, he was invisible. That was fine by him. Invisible men don't get asked questions. Invisible men get to go home at night. "Morning, Ethan," said Rosa, the front desk security guard, one of the few people in the building who ever looked him in the eye. "Morning, Rosa. How's your boy's knee?" "Doctor says another 2 weeks and he's back on the field." She smiled. "You remembered." "Course I remembered." Ethan tipped an imaginary hat and kept moving. He liked Rosa. He liked the night janitor Marcus who split shifts with him. He liked the young interns who sometimes fell asleep at their desks and left half-eaten sandwiches he'd quietly toss so they wouldn't get chewed out. What he did not like, what nobody at Vantage liked if they were honest, was the man whose corner office he was about to clean. Gregory Kane, Chief Executive Officer. 48 years old, 3 ex-wives, 1 yacht, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Ethan let himself into the office with his master key. The place was the size of his daughter's entire elementary school gymnasium, floor-to-ceiling glass, a desk carved from a single slab of walnut, and on the far wall, framed in gold, a magazine cover with Kane's face on it and the words, "The Man Who Reinvented Safety." Ethan looked at that cover for a long moment. Then he went to work emptying the trash. He was almost finished when he heard the voices. They came fast and loud through the door Kane had left cracked open. 3 men and a woman, all in suits that cost more than Ethan made in a month, all talking over each other in that particular tone that Ethan had learned to recognize a long time ago. The tone of people who are afraid, but too proud to say so. "Cannot go live Thursday, Greg. I'm telling you the load balancing architecture won't hold." "It will hold." That was Kane. "We tested it. We tested it at 40% capacity. The launch will hit 90 within the first hour. Then we'll scale." "You can't scale a design flaw, Greg. The whole Meridian framework was built on assumptions that—" Ethan's hand stopped moving. Meridian. The word landed in his chest like a fist. He stood there in the middle of Gregory Kane's office, a garbage bag hanging from one hand, and for the first time in 2 years, the invisible man forgot to be invisible. "You hear me?" The woman was almost shouting now. "If Meridian fails on launch day, we're not talking about downtime. We're talking about the cooling systems in 3 data centers going offline. We're talking about a fire hazard. We're talking about people." "Nobody is going to get hurt," Kane snapped. "Get me the projections and get out of my office. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes, and I will not walk in there and tell them we're delaying a $2 billion launch because you got cold feet." Ethan set the garbage bag down very quietly. He knew that name. Meridian. He knew it the way a man knows the name of the disease that killed someone he loved. Because he had helped design it. 12 years ago. A lifetime ago. And he knew that the woman in that room was right. The suits filed out. Kane came around the corner, buttoning his jacket, and he saw Ethan standing there, and his lip curled. "You're still here." "Just finishing up, sir." Ethan reached for his cart. "Well, finish faster, and leave the coffee. I'll need it in the boardroom." Kane grabbed a folder off his desk, then paused and looked at Ethan the way a man looks at a stain on the carpet. "You know, I keep telling facilities to send someone who can be in and out before 6. I don't pay to have the help underfoot when I'm working." "Yes, sir." Kane started for the door, and Ethan, the quiet man, the invisible man, the man who had spent 2 years keeping his head down so he could keep his job and keep his daughter fed, heard himself speak. "Sir, the Meridian framework." Kane stopped. He turned around slowly, one eyebrow climbing his forehead. "Excuse me." Ethan's mouth had gone dry. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to shut up, apologize, disappear. "You have a daughter. You have rent. You have a job you cannot afford to lose." But he thought about the woman's voice. "We're talking about people." And he thought about a man named David Reyes, dead 12 years now, who had said almost exactly those same words to almost exactly this same kind of man and been ignored. "The load balancing," Ethan said. "The woman's right. If you launch Thursday, the framework's going to cascade. It'll pull the thermal regulation down with it. You'll have a fire before you have a fix." For 3 full seconds, Gregory Kane simply stared at him. Then he laughed. It wasn't a small laugh. It was a big, delighted, cruel laugh, the kind of laugh you laugh when the universe hands you a gift. "Oh, this is perfect," Kane said. This is perfect. Come here." He grabbed Ethan by the sleeve of his coveralls, actually grabbed him, and started steering him toward the boardroom. "No, you're coming with me. You have got to say that again, in front of the board. Please, I am begging you." "Sir." "You clean toilets," Kane said, still smiling, still pulling. "And you have an opinion on a $2 billion systems architecture. I want everyone to hear this." The Vantage boardroom was designed to intimidate. Long black table, 14 chairs, a wall of screens. And around that table sat some of the most powerful people in American technology. The CFO, the board chairman, 3 senior VPs, a rotating cast of directors who had flown in from 4 time zones. And now standing at the head of it, in gray coveralls holding a trash bag he hadn't managed to put down, stood the janitor. "Everyone," Kane announced, spreading his arms wide. "I want to introduce you to our newest systems consultant. Found him right outside my office. Turns out the maintenance staff has some serious concerns about our launch." The laughter rippled around the table. Ethan felt his face go hot. "Go on," Kane said, pulling out his own chair and dropping into it, lacing his fingers behind his head. Tell them what you told me. Tell the board with 200 combined years of engineering experience why we should delay the biggest launch in company history because the guy who mops the floor has a feeling." A young VP snickered. "Is this a team-building exercise?" "This is Greg being Greg," someone muttered. Ethan looked at all of them. The expensive suits, the smug faces, the rolling eyes. And something happened inside him that had not happened in 12 years. He stopped being afraid. He set the trash bag down on the floor. He straightened up, and when he spoke, his voice was no longer soft. "Pull up the Meridian schematic," Ethan said. "The core architecture, not the marketing deck, the real one." The room went quiet. Not respectful quiet, amused quiet. The kind of silence people give a street performer before he does something embarrassing. Kane grinned. "You heard the man." He nodded to the tech running the screens. "Give the janitor his schematic." The screen changed. And Ethan Carter looked up at a design he had helped build with his own hands 12 years earlier, and felt the past reach up and grab him by the throat. "There," he said and pointed. "Node Cluster 7, the thermal handoff." Nobody laughed now. There was a different quality to the silence, the faint, uneasy quality of people who have noticed that the street performer just did something that shouldn't be possible. "When the load crosses 82%, Ethan continued, The balancing protocol reroutes through the secondary cluster. That's by design. That part's fine. But whoever updated the thermal regulation layer, he glanced at Kane. They decoupled it from the load monitor. So now when Cluster 7 reroutes, the cooling doesn't follow. The system thinks the heat moved with the load. It didn't. It's still sitting right there in Cluster 7 with nothing watching it. A director leaned forward. How would you even... You launch Thursday. Ethan said, you hit 90% in the first hour like your VP told you. Cluster 7 reroutes. Cooling stays behind. And you cook 3 data centers from the inside out before anybody in this room finishes their lunch. Silence. Kane's grin had frozen. This is nonsense. This is a maintenance worker who overheard a conversation and is repeating buzzwords. Then prove me wrong, Ethan said. The room turned. Excuse me, Kane said. You said you tested it at 40%. Ethan folded his arms. So test it at 90, right now. Run a live stress simulation on the Meridian core, push it to 90, and watch what Cluster 7 does. If I'm wrong, I'll walk out of here. I'll never say another word. You can fire me on the spot. But if I'm right, he looked around the table, meeting every eye. You owe every single person in this company an apology for almost getting them killed. The chairman of the board, a silver-haired man named Whitfield, who had not said a single word until now, spoke very quietly. Do it, Greg. Frank, this is absurd. You brought him in here to embarrass him, Whitfield said. So embarrass him. Run the simulation. Kane's jaw worked. For the first time, the confidence in his eyes flickered. Fine, he said. Fine, run it. And when it holds, this man is escorted out of the building, and facilities finds us someone who understands their place. The tech at the console started typing. Ethan didn't move. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching the numbers climb on the screen. 40%. 50. 60. Sharson. And Gregory Kane watched him. And a small cold worry began to spread across the CEO's face, because the janitor wasn't nervous. The janitor wasn't sweating. The janitor was watching those numbers the way a doctor watches a heart monitor, and he already knew what the heartbeat was going to do. 70%. 80. 82. Ethan said quietly to no one. Watch Cluster 7. The screen flickered. A single node on the diagram blinked from green to amber, then the one next to it. Then a whole cluster went red. Thermal warning, the tech said, and his voice had changed. I've got a thermal warning on Cluster 7. Temperature's climbing. It's climbing fast. The cooling layer isn't responding. Shut it down, Whitfield said. Cluster 8 going amber. Shut it down. The tech killed the simulation. The screen froze on a diagram lit up in red, a $2 billion system caught in the exact moment of catching fire, and the entire Vantage boardroom sat in absolute ringing silence. Ethan Carter uncrossed his arms. That, he said, is what would have happened Thursday. Except Thursday, there's no kill switch. Thursday, it's real. Nobody spoke. Kane's face had gone the color of paper. That could be a fluke. A simulation error. It's not a fluke, Greg. It was the woman from the office, the VP, who'd warned him. She was standing now, staring at the screen, and there were tears of pure fury in her eyes. It's exactly what I told you. It's exactly what I've been telling you for 3 weeks. And a man who cleans your office just diagnosed it in 90 seconds while you called him a joke. Slowly, one by one, every head at that table turned to look at Ethan Carter. And Ethan looked back at them, and for a moment, just a moment, the coveralls and the cart and the worn boots seemed to fall away. And standing at the head of that boardroom was someone else entirely. Someone they had walked past 1,000 times and never once seen. Whitfield found his voice first. Who are you? Ethan reached down. He picked up his trash bag, And when he answered, his voice was quiet again, but the whole room leaned in to hear it. "I'm the man you should have listened to 12 years ago," he said. "The first time this system killed someone." And with that, he turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving 14 of the most powerful people in the country staring at an empty doorway and a screen full of red, and the dawning, sickening understanding that they had no idea who had just been standing in front of them. The elevator doors closed before anyone thought to stop him. Ethan pressed the button for the ground floor and watched the numbers count down, and only then did he let his shoulders drop because his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from something older than fear. He hadn't said that man's name out loud in 12 years. David Reyes. And now he'd thrown it into a boardroom full of strangers like a match into dry grass, and there was no taking it back. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from the after-school program. "Reminder, Lily's pickup is 3:30 today." He looked at it for a long moment, and the shaking in his hands eased, because that was the thing that mattered. That was the only thing that had ever mattered. Whatever he'd just set on fire upstairs, he'd still be standing outside that school at 3:30, and his daughter would come running, and none of these people would ever touch that part of his life. He told himself that all the way down to the lobby. He was wrong. By the time the doors opened, Rosa was standing there waiting for him, her face pale, her radio in her hand. Ethan, what did you do?" "Nothing. I finished the offices. I'm heading out." "They're calling down. Security got a message from the 17th floor 2 minutes ago." She grabbed his arm. "They said do not let the maintenance contractor leave the building." His stomach dropped. "Rosa, I've got to pick up my daughter." I know, but they're—" Her radio crackled. A voice came through tight and official. "Front desk confirmed the contractor is still on premises. Mr. Whitfield wants him brought to the executive floor. Do not let him exit." Rosa looked at him. For one long second she had a choice, and Ethan saw her make it. She keyed the radio. "Front desk copies. He's in the restroom. I'll hold him here." She let go of the button. "You've got about 90 seconds before someone comes down here. If you're gonna run now." And that was the moment Ethan Carter didn't run. He thought about it. God, he thought about it. He thought about grabbing his coat and walking out that revolving door and never coming back, disappearing back into the invisible life that had kept him safe for 12 years. But then he thought about that screen full of red. He thought about 3 data centers. He thought about the 200 people who worked in those buildings, people with kids of their own people who'd be standing at their desks on Thursday when the cooling failed. "No," he said. "I'll wait." Rosa stared at him. "Are you crazy?" "Probably." He almost smiled. "But if I run, they bury it. They find some reason it was a fluke they launch anyway, and people get hurt. I've seen this before, Rosa. I've seen exactly this before." He pulled out his phone. "I just need to make a call first."
I'm smiling.
He dialed the after-school program. "Hi, this is Ethan Carter, Lily's dad. Something's come up at work and I might be a few minutes late for pickup. Can you— Yeah, if I'm not there by 3:45, can you keep her in the reading room? Tell her dad's coming. Tell her I promised." A pause. Thank you so much." He hung up, and when he looked up, the elevator behind him was descending again fast, and Rosa stepped back behind her desk and pretended to type, and Ethan straightened his coveralls the way another man might straighten a tie. The doors opened. It wasn't security. It was the woman, Moiseye, the VP from the office. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a jaw set, like she'd spent years learning how to hold it steady in rooms full of men who didn't want to hear her. Her name badge read Priya Sharma, VP Engineering. "You," she said, breathless, like she'd taken the stairs. "Don't move, please. I have been trying to get to you before Kane does." "Kane wants me gone. Kane wants you destroyed," she said. "He's up there right now telling the board you're a disgruntled ex-employee with a grudge that you sabotaged the simulation somehow, that none of it's real." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. But I saw your face when the cluster went red. You weren't surprised. You knew the exact second it would happen. You said, "Watch Cluster 7," before it did anything. Nobody does that from a lucky guess. Ethan said nothing. You worked on Meridian, she said. It wasn't a question. The original build, 12 years ago. His silence was its own answer. Who are you? She asked. The same question Whitfield had asked. But she asked it differently. She asked it like she already half knew and was terrified of being right. And before Ethan could decide whether to answer, the second elevator opened, and Gregory Kane strode out with 2 security guards flanking him and the board chairman Whitfield, walking 3 steps behind, and the calm Ethan had held onto since the boardroom evaporated all at once. There he is, Kane said. There's our saboteur. He pointed. That man is a former contractor with a documented history of instability. He gained access to a proprietary system and manipulated a simulation to frighten my board. I want him detained, and I want the police called. Greg. Whitfield's voice was tired. The police aren't coming. Frank, he threatened us. He said this system killed someone. Yes. Whitfield turned to Ethan, and his old eyes were unreadable. He did say that, and I would very much like to know what he meant, before we call anyone. The 2 security guards had stopped uncertain looking between the CEO and the chairman. Rosa watched from behind her desk, frozen. Priya Sharma had stepped slightly, almost imperceptibly, so that she was standing between Ethan and the guards. And Ethan realized the whole lobby was waiting on him. His name was David Reyes, Ethan said. The name meant nothing to most of them, but Whitfield went very still. David was the lead thermal engineer on the original Meridian project. Ethan went on, and his voice was steady now, quiet and steady. The voice of a man reading a name off a stone he'd visited 100 times. This was before Vantage bought the framework. Back when it belonged to a company called Halbrook Systems. I was the lead architect. David and I built the thermal handoff together, Cluster 7. The exact node that just went red upstairs. That's ancient history, Kane snapped. That system's been rebuilt a dozen times. Let him finish, Greg. Ethan looked at Whitfield. We found a flaw, late in the build. The same class of flaw you've got now, cooling decoupling from load under high stress. David flagged it. He wrote a full report. He recommended we delay the rollout 90 days to fix it properly. He paused. Our CEO at Halbrook decided 90 days was too expensive. He buried the report. He launched on schedule. The lobby was silent. 6 weeks later, the flaw triggered in a live environment, a data center in Ohio. The cooling failed exactly the way it just did on that screen upstairs. There was a fire in the server hall. David was on site that night running diagnostics. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't make it out. Priya Sharma's hand had come up to cover her mouth. I found the buried report in the CEO's files, Ethan said. I took it to the press. It ended the company. It ended my career. Turns out nobody in this industry wants to hire the guy who burns down his own employer, even when the employer's the one who killed somebody. A thin, humorless smile. And I stopped caring about any of it. I had a wife who was getting sick, and a daughter who was 3 years old, and I decided the only system I was ever going to be responsible for again was making sure that little girl got picked up from school every single day of her life. And he looked around the lobby. So no, Mr. Kane, I'm not a saboteur. I'm a maintenance contractor who took a quiet job at a company he didn't recognize because Vantage bought the Meridian framework out of Halbrook's bankruptcy 6 years ago and slapped a new name on it. And I didn't put it together until I heard your VP screaming about Cluster 7 through your office door this morning. His voice dropped, and I couldn't walk away. Because I already know what it looks like when men like you decide a deadline is worth more than a life. I've buried a friend over it. I'm not going to bury 200 more. For a long moment, nobody said anything at all. Then Kane laughed, and it was uglier than before because there was fear underneath it now. That's a very moving story, very theatrical. But it's just that, a story. There's no proof of any of it. And even if there were, it has nothing to do with a simulation that this man clearly rigged. I can prove all of it, Ethan said. Kane stopped. The Halbrook report. David's original flaw analysis. I have a copy. I've had a copy for 12 years. He looked at Whitfield. And if you pull the current Meridian codebase and compare the thermal regulation module to that report, you'll find the exact same architecture, the exact same decoupling, because Vantage never fixed it. You bought a broken system, you renamed it, and you've been building on top of a 12-year-old death trap for 6 years. Your VP figured it out 3 weeks ago. I figured it out this morning, and the only person in this building who still refuses to see it, he turned and looked directly at Kane, is the man whose bonus depends on Thursday's launch. The accusation hung in the air, and Whitfield turned slowly to look at his CEO. Greg, he said quietly, is your compensation package tied to the launch date? Kane's mouth opened, closed. That's every executive has performance incentives. Frank, you can't seriously... Answer the question. Is your bonus tied to launching Thursday? Yes or no? The silence stretched. Yes, Kane said finally. But that has nothing to do with... How much? Frank. How much, Greg? Kane's jaw clenched. $4 million, contingent on a Q4 launch. But I resent the implication that I would ever put money above. You threw a coffee cup at a man's head this morning, Whitfield said, for suggesting your $4 million launch might have a flaw in it. He let that sit. Then he turned back to Ethan. The report. How fast can you get it to me? It's on a drive at my apartment. I can have it here in an hour, but you don't even need it yet. Ethan nodded toward the elevators. You've got the current code base upstairs. You've got engineers. Have them pull the thermal regulation module right now and trace the load monitor dependency. Either the cooling is coupled to the load or it isn't. You don't need my 12-year-old report to check that. You just need someone brave enough to look. Whitfield studied him. Then he turned to Priya Sharma. Ms. Sharma, can your team do that? In 20 minutes, she said instantly. Then do it. Now. He looked at the security guards. Stand down. Nobody's calling the police. Nobody's detaining anybody. And to Ethan almost gently, Mr. Carter, I'd take it as a personal favor if you'd come back upstairs and wait while we verify what you're telling us. Ethan glanced at the clock behind Rosa's desk. 10:47 in the morning. Plenty of time. Plenty of time before 3:30. He didn't know yet how wrong that would turn out to be. All right, he said. I'll wait. They put him in a glass conference room on the 17th floor, the kind with frosted walls, and gave him a cup of coffee. He didn't drink. And for 40 minutes, Ethan Carter sat alone and listened to the muffled sound of an emergency spinning up on the other side of the glass. Phones ringing, doors slamming, voices rising and falling. 12 years he'd spent keeping quiet, and now he'd walked into a building and turned it inside out before lunch. He thought about calling Lily's school again. He didn't. He didn't want to worry them twice. At 11:31, the door opened, and Priya Sharma came in and sat down across from him, and her face had changed. Whatever had been on it before the sharpness, the fight was gone. What was left was something closer to sickness. You were right, she said. Ethan let out a long, slow breath. The thermal module, the load monitor dependency, was stripped out in a patch 4 years ago. Somebody decoupled it to squeeze out a performance gain, and whoever signed off on it either didn't understand the risk or didn't care. She swallowed. It's exactly what you said. Under high-load cluster 7 reroutes, and the cooling stays blind. We've been running production traffic through this thing for 4 years. It's never crossed 82% in production. Thursday would have been the first time. Her voice cracked. You saved Mr. Carter. Do you understand what you just did? Thursday's launch was going to put 6 times the normal load on that system. We would have... I know, he said quietly. How did nobody catch this? How did I almost not catch this? Because the flaw only shows up under a specific stress condition that almost never happens in normal operation, Ethan said. It's not a bug that announces itself. It sits there for years perfectly quiet, and then one day the load crosses a line and it wakes up. That's what makes it so dangerous. That's what killed David. He looked at her. You caught it. 3 weeks ago you caught it. Don't let anyone tell you you didn't. You just couldn't get anyone to listen. She looked down at her hands. Kane shut me down 4 separate times. Told me I was being alarmist. Told me the launch was locked. Told me if I raised it with the board he'd make sure I never worked in this industry again. Her jaw tightened. And then a man in coveralls said the same thing I'd been saying and made him run the simulation in 90 seconds. Sometimes it's not about being right, Ethan said. It's about being right in a way they can't ignore. You gave him a memo. I gave him a screen full of fire. He almost smiled. Fire's harder to argue with. The door opened again. Whitfield came in, and behind him Gregory Kane, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Whitfield sat. Kane didn't. Kane stood by the frosted glass with his arms crossed and his face carved out of stone, and Ethan understood immediately that whatever came next, Kane was not going down without taking somebody with him. Mr. Carter, Whitfield began, the board has verified your claim. The flaw is real. Thursday's launch is postponed indefinitely, and on behalf of this company I owe you a... He rigged it. Everyone turned. Kane had said it flatly, almost calmly, and now he pushed off the wall. I've had an hour to think, and it doesn't add up. A maintenance contractor doesn't diagnose a 4-year-old architectural flaw in 90 seconds off a glance at a schematic. It's not possible. Unless... He pointed at Ethan. He already knew. Unless he had access to our systems he wasn't supposed to have. Unless he's been in our code base. I told you who I am. You told us a story. A sad story about a dead friend and a burned-down company, and it's very moving, but here's what I hear. Kane turned to the board chairman. Frank, this man has a documented grudge against the exact system we're running. By his own admission, he destroyed a company over it once. He's been inside this building for 2 years, with a master key and access to every floor. And now, 6 days before our biggest launch, he suddenly surfaces with a doomsday scenario that just happens to postpone the launch and just happens to make me look reckless. Kane's voice rose. How do we know he didn't plant the flaw? How do we know he hasn't spent 2 years quietly corrupting our infrastructure so he could ride in and play the hero? A man who's willing to burn down one company to prove a point, why not 2? Bob, it was a good move. Ethan had to give him that. It was a very good move because it was almost impossible to disprove, and it turned every fact in Ethan's favor into a reason to suspect him. He saw Whitfield hesitate. He saw the doubt land. And Ethan felt the old exhaustion rise in his chest, the bone-deep tiredness of a man who has told the truth before and watched it lose to a lie told with more confidence. The flaw was introduced 4 years ago, Priya said, in a patch. There's a commit history. Mr. Carter's only had building access for 2 years. Which he could have researched. Which he could have... Kane waved a hand. Commit histories can be read. Anyone can find out when a change was made and build a story around it. I can tell you who made the change, Ethan said. The room stopped. You want to talk about the commit history? Ethan leaned forward. Fine, let's talk about it. The thermal decoupling patch went in 4 years ago. I've never seen your commit logs. I've never had access to your code base. I clean your offices. Mr. Kane, I don't have engineering credentials here, but I'll tell you exactly what that patch looks like because I know exactly what change would have to have been made to create the flaw I just described. He held Kane's eyes. Someone removed the dependency link between the load monitor and the thermal governor in Cluster 7. They probably did it to hit a latency target. And I'd bet my life the person who signed off on that patch is someone who was told to prioritize performance metrics over safety review. Someone under pressure from above to make the numbers look good before a funding round or a launch. He paused. Pull the sign-off. Pull the name of the executive who approved that patch 4 years ago, and then look me in the eye and tell me I planted anything. Kane's face didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. Whitfield noticed. "Priya," the chairman said slowly, not taking his eyes off Kane. "The patch 4 years ago. The decoupling patch. Who signed off on it?" "I'd have to pull the record." "Then pull it." She was already typing on her tablet. The room waited. Ethan watched Kane, and Kane watched Ethan, and neither of them looked away. Priya went still. "Ms. Sharma," Whitfield said. "Who approved the patch?" She looked up, and she looked at Kane. "Greg did," she said quietly. 4 years ago. He was VP of engineering then before he made CEO. The performance patch that decoupled the cooling from the load monitor was approved and signed by Gregory Kane. She swallowed. "It's the patch that got him promoted. The latency numbers it produced. They put him on that magazine cover. The man who reinvented safety." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the building. Ethan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just sat there and let the truth do to Gregory Kane what it had failed to do 12 years ago, what it should have done to another CEO in another building a long time before he let it land. Kane's mouth opened. "That's that patch passed every safety review at the time. The standards were different then. I didn't nobody understood the risk profile. David Reyes understood it," Ethan said. 12 years ago. He wrote it down. And a CEO buried the report because 90 days was too expensive." He stood up slowly. "You didn't invent this flaw, Mr. Kane. You inherited it the same as everyone. But 4 years ago, somebody handed you a chance to fix it, and instead, you tore out the one safeguard that would have caught it, because a faster system got you a promotion. And then 6 weeks ago, when the woman sitting next to me told you it was dangerous, you told her to shut up. You told her you'd end her career. And this morning, when I said the same thing, you threw a coffee cup at my head and dragged me into a boardroom to laugh at me." Ethan's voice never rose. It didn't have to. "You didn't build the trap, but you spent 4 years standing in front of it, telling everyone who noticed it to be quiet. That's not the same as murder, but it's a lot closer than you want it to be." Nobody moved. Whitfield rose from his chair, and he looked older than he had an hour ago, and he looked at his CEO for a long, long moment. "Greg," he said, "I need you to go to your office and wait there. The board is going to convene an emergency session. You will not touch a system, a phone, or a keyboard until we've spoken with legal. Frank." Now Greg. For 1 second, Ethan thought Kane might refuse. He saw the man's fists clench, saw the pure animal fury flash across his face, the fury of someone who has spent his whole life winning and has just for the first time lost. Then Kane looked at Ethan, and what he said very quietly, just for the two of them. "You think you've won something." Kane's voice was almost gentle. "You think you're the hero. But I know men like you. You had one good day 12 years ago, and you've spent every day since hiding from it. You didn't come here to save anybody. You came here to feel like a somebody again." He smiled thin and cold. "Enjoy it. Because whatever they offer you when I'm gone, the job, the money, the title, you'll turn it down. You know why? Because the second you take it, you become one of us. And you can't stand the thought." He leaned in. "So you'll walk away. You'll go back to your mop and your little girl and your quiet, invisible life. And in a year, nobody in this building will even remember your name." And then he walked out. The door hissed shut behind him. Ethan stood there in the quiet, and for a moment, just a moment, the words landed. Because they were close to true. Because there was a piece of him that had wanted exactly one thing this morning, and it wasn't to be a hero. It was to go home. To be nobody. To be safe. Then Priya Sharma spoke. "He's wrong, you know." Ethan looked at her. "You didn't do this to feel like a somebody." She met his eyes. "You did it because 200 people in this building have kids they pick up from school, and you couldn't stand the thought of any of them not showing up." She glanced at the clock, then back at him, and something in her expression shifted. "What time do you have to get your daughter?" Ethan followed her gaze to the clock on the wall. And his blood went cold. It read 2:52. He'd been in that building since 6:42 that morning. He'd walked in as an invisible man with a mop and a cart, and somewhere in the last 8 hours, he'd torn down a CEO, stopped a disaster, and buried a ghost he'd carried for 12 years. And he had entirely lost track of time. He had 38 minutes to cross a city he couldn't cross in an hour. "I have to go," he said, and he was already moving, already through the door, already reaching for the phone in his pocket. "I have to go right now." "Mr. Carter," Whitfield started. "I made a promise," Ethan said, and there was something in his voice none of them had heard yet. Something that cut clean through all the calm he'd held on to all day. "Every single day, I show up. That's the whole thing. That's the one thing I've never broken." He hit Lily's school in his contacts, pressed the phone to his ear, and the line rang and rang and rang. Come on, pick up." The office line went to a recording. "You've reached the front office. Our hours are—" He hung up and dialed the after-school program directly, and it rang, and Priya was saying something, and Whitfield was saying something, and Ethan heard none of it, because all he could hear was a phone ringing in an empty office across a city he was never going to cross in time, and a promise he had made to his daughter over the grave of her mother, the one promise he had built his entire broken life around. "I will always show up." And for the first time in 12 years, Ethan Carter was terrified he was about to break it. The line clicked. A voice answered, and what it said made the phone go still against his ear. "Mr. Carter," the voice said. "This is Karen from the front office. I've got Lily right here next to me. She's fine. She's coloring." The relief that hit Ethan nearly buckled his knees. He grabbed the edge of the conference table to steady himself. "She's there. She's okay. She's right here. She wanted to know if you were coming, so I told her I'd call you myself." A pause, warm and knowing. "You sound like you're having quite a day. You have no idea." Ethan breathed. "Karen, listen. I'm across town. I got held up at work, and I know that's not an excuse, but I need you to do me a favor. I need you to keep her right there with you until I get there. Don't put her on the after-school bus. Don't let her wait outside. Just keep her right next to you, and I will be there as fast as I possibly can." "Of course. She's not going anywhere." Another pause. "Do you want to talk to her?" "Yeah." His throat tightened. "Yeah, put her on." There was a rustle, and then a small voice, high and bright and utterly unbothered by any of it. "Daddy." "Hey, baby." "Karen, let me use the good markers, the ones with the smells. I'm drawing you a dinosaur." Ethan closed his eyes. 8 years old. A dinosaur with smelly markers. And he'd spent the whole day tearing down a billion-dollar company. And this small voice, this dinosaur, this was the only thing that had ever been real. "I can't wait to see it," he said. "Listen, Lily, Daddy's running a little late today, but I'm coming. You hear me? I'm coming right now. I just need you to wait with Miss Karen and finish that dinosaur, okay?" "Okay." A beat. "Are you okay, Daddy? Your voice sounds funny." "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm real okay. I'll be there before you know it." He swallowed hard. "I love you. Give the phone back to Miss Karen." The rustle again, and Karen's voice returned. "We'll be here. Take a breath and drive safe, all right. A late dad is a lot better than a dad who wraps his car around a pole. She'd rather have you slow than not at all." "Thank you," Ethan said, and he meant it more than he'd meant anything in a long time. "Thank you, Karen." He hung up. And when he turned around, the entire conference room was staring at him. Whitfield, Priya, 2 board members who'd slipped in during the call, and he realized they'd heard all of it. Every word. The most powerful people in the building had just watched the man who'd saved their company come apart over a phone call with a second grader. He straightened up, embarrassed, already reaching for the door. I'm sorry, I have to go. I know there's more to talk about, but my daughter... Mr. Carter. Whitfield's voice stopped him. The old man was looking at him with an expression Ethan couldn't read. Where's your daughter's school? Riverside Elementary, other side of the city, off Kellerman. That's 40 minutes in traffic, 35 if you speed and get lucky. Whitfield checked his watch. You'll never make the bell. I know that. Ethan's hand was on the door. That's why I have to go now. You don't have a car in the garage. You take the bus. Ethan froze, because it was true. He took the number 40 in the mornings, and the number 40 home, and the number 40 on a weekday afternoon would get him to Riverside Elementary somewhere around 4:15, and he would not make Lily wait an extra 45 minutes because he'd decided to play hero in a boardroom. Whitfield turned to one of the board members. Denise, my car's in the executive garage. Level 2, the black one. Tell Andre it's an emergency and I need him to take Mr. Carter to Riverside Elementary right now. No stops. Mr. Whitfield, I can't, Ethan started. You can and you will. Whitfield's voice left no room. You just prevented a catastrophe that would have cost this company everything and possibly killed people. The least I can do is get you to your daughter on time. Andre drives like the devil when he has permission. He'll make the bell. He almost smiled. Consider it the first payment on a very large debt. Ethan stood there for a second, torn between his pride and his daughter won the way she always won. Thank you, he said. Go. We'll talk tomorrow. Come in at 10. We have a great deal to discuss. Whitfield's eyes were serious now. There's going to be an offer, Mr. Carter. I want you to think about it tonight. But go get your daughter first. Everything else can wait. Andre drove like the devil. Ethan sat in the backs of a car that cost more than he'd make in 3 years, watching the city blur past, watching the clock on the dashboard tick from 2:58 to 3:04 to 3:11. And his heart was hammering the whole way, not because of the offer or the board or the ruined CEO he'd left behind, but because of a single number 3:30. The bell. The one deadline in his life that actually mattered. His phone buzzed. A text. He half expected it to be from the school, but it was a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Carter, this is Priya Sharma. I got your number from HR. I need to tell you something before your meeting tomorrow, and it can't wait. It's about Kane. Call me when you have a minute. It's important. Ethan stared at it. He typed back, in the middle of something. Give me the short version. The reply came fast. Kane just left the building. He was supposed to wait in his office for legal. He didn't. Security says he grabbed a laptop and walked out. Whitfield doesn't know yet. But I know Kane and a man like him doesn't just go quietly. Watch yourself. Ethan read it twice. Watch yourself. He didn't know exactly what it meant, but he knew the kind of man Kane was, and he knew that men like that, when they lose everything, don't lose it alone. They look for someone to take with them. He texted back, Understood. Thanks. We'll talk tomorrow. Then he put the phone in his pocket and made himself let it go because Riverside Elementary was coming up on the right, and the clock read 3:26, and Andre had done the impossible. 4 minutes to spare. Andre said from the front seat, pulling up to the curb. Told you, devil driving. Ethan was out of the car before it fully stopped. He walked fast up the path past the flagpole in through the front doors, and there she was, Lily, at a little table in the front office, tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth, filling in a dinosaur with a purple marker that probably smelled like grapes. And Karen looked up and smiled, and Lily looked up, and the whole world. Ethan had spent 12 years building, narrowed down to the moment her face lit up. Daddy. She came off the chair like a shot and hit him at a full run, and he caught her and lifted her and held her, and for a second he couldn't breathe and didn't want to. I finished the dinosaur, she announced into his neck. It's a stegosaurus. It smells like grapes. It's the best dinosaur I've ever seen, Ethan said, and his voice cracked, and he didn't care. I'm sorry I was late, baby. You weren't late. Karen said late is after 3:30, and you're not after 3:30. Lily pulled back and looked at him with the flawless logic of an 8-year-old. So you're on time. You're always on time. Ethan looked at the clock on the office wall. 3:28. Yeah, he said softly. I'm always on time. He carried her out to the car, and Andre held the door, and Lily's eyes went huge at the leather seats and the little screens, and she spent the whole ride home asking whose car it was, and why it was so fancy, and whether they were rich now, and Ethan laughed for the first time all day and said, "No, baby, we're not rich. A nice man just gave us a ride." But that night after the dinosaur went on the refrigerator and the grilled cheese was eaten and Lily was asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him, and he thought about the offer Whitfield had mentioned, and he thought about what Kane had said to him in that conference room, and he could not make the two things fit together. The second you take it, you become one of us. He didn't want to become one of them. That was the whole point. That was why he'd walked away 12 years ago. He'd seen what those rooms did to people, how they hollowed men out and filled them back up with numbers and deadlines and bonuses tied to launch dates, and he had wanted no part of it ever again. But then, he thought about Priya Sharma shut down 4 times, told she'd never work again if she raised the alarm. He thought about David Reyes dead in a server hall because a CEO decided 90 days was too expensive. He thought about the 200 people in that building and the ones who'd come after them, and how there would always be another Meridian, another flaw sitting quiet in the dark, another executive whose bonus depended on nobody looking too closely. And he thought somebody has to be in the room, somebody who remembers, somebody who can't be bought, somebody who's already lost everything once and knows exactly what it's worth. His phone buzzed on the table. Priya again. "Are you home? Are you safe?" He frowned. Home. Safe. Why? The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Because Kane's not just gone. He took the incident logs with him. All of them. The simulation records, the code base, snapshots, the commit history that shows he signed the patch. He wiped the server copies before he left. He's covering his tracks. Ethan sat up straight. "Then it's my word against his," he typed. "And I'm the janitor with a grudge." "Yes," Priya wrote back. "Which is why tomorrow morning when you walk into that building, Kane is going to be waiting with a lawyer and a story. And the story is going to be that you sabotaged the system, deleted the evidence to frame him, and invented the whole thing. He's already emailed the board. I've seen it. He's calling it the Carter Incident. He's going to make you the villain." Ethan stared at the phone. Again, 12 years ago, he'd had the report. The actual document, David's own words, the proof that ended a company. It had cost him everything, but it had been real, and no one could take it from him. This time, Kane had taken the proof and left him holding nothing but his word. And a man's word, when that man wears coveralls and mops floors, is worth exactly nothing in a room full of lawyers. So, "I still have David's report," Ethan typed slowly. "The original Halbrook analysis. It shows the flaw exists. It won't prove Kane signed the patch, but it proves the flaw is real and that it's been known for 12 years. That helps," Priya wrote. "But he'll say the report is old, that it doesn't apply to the current system that you planted it. He's good at this, Ethan. He's spent his whole career learning how to make the truth sound like a lie." Ethan set the phone down. He rubbed his face with both hands. And then a memory surfaced. Something from that morning. Something so small he'd almost forgotten it. The simulation. When Priya's team had run the stress test in the boardroom, when they'd pushed the load to 82% and watched Cluster 7 go red, that had been on the live system in front of 14 board members and a room full of screens. Kane could wipe the server logs. He could delete the code-based snapshots. But he couldn't wipe 14 pairs of eyes. He picked up the phone. The boardroom simulation. This morning. Who else saw Cluster 7 go red? Names. Everyone. The whole board. Whitfield. The CFO 3. VPs, the directors. No. Ethan typed, "Not the board. They can be pressured bot made to doubt what they saw. I need somebody who has no stake in it. Somebody who was in that room but doesn't answer to Kane or the board." He paused, thinking. The tech. The guy at the console who ran the simulation. What's his name? A pause. Then Danny. Danny Okafor. He's a junior systems engineer. He ran the console this morning. Does Danny still have the raw simulation output? Not the server logs, the local copy on the machine he was running. The thing that would have cached to the terminal. The three dots pulsed for a long time. Then, oh my God. The boardroom terminals cache locally for 48 hours before they sync and purge. Kane wiped the server. But if Danny ran the sim from the boardroom console, there's a local cache. Kane doesn't have access to that machine. It's air-gapped for board sessions. It's still there. The raw output is still there. Ethan felt something cold and sharp settle into place in his chest. Not relief, not yet, but the first solid ground he'd felt all night. Then here's what happens, he typed. You don't touch it, you don't log in, you don't do anything that puts your name on it, because if Kane's building a case, the last thing you need is to be the engineer who accessed the evidence at midnight. You call Whitfield right now tonight, and you tell him exactly what you told me. You tell him the boardroom console has a local cache, and it purges in 48 hours and Kane can't reach it, and you tell him to have legal and IT pull it together, on the record with witnesses first thing in the morning, before Kane's lawyer says a word. He'll want to know how I know about the cache. Tell him a maintenance contractor who's cleaned every server room in this building for 2 years happens to know how the machines work. Ethan almost smiled, because that part's actually true. There was a long pause. Then Priya wrote, "You know, for a guy who walked away from all of this 12 years ago, you sure remember how to fight." Ethan looked at the dinosaur on the refrigerator. Purple Stegosaurus, smelled like grapes. "I never wanted to fight," he typed. "I just don't know how to watch a man like Kane win. I've done it once. I buried a friend behind it. I'm not doing it again." "Get some sleep," Priya wrote. "Big day tomorrow." But Ethan didn't sleep, not for a long time. He sat at that kitchen table until nearly 2 in the morning, and he thought about the offer, and the report, and the cache purging its way down toward zero in an air-gapped machine on the 17th floor. And he thought about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. And somewhere in the dark, he made a decision. He wasn't going to walk in tomorrow as the janitor defending himself against a CEO. He was done being on defense. He'd spent 12 years on defense, hiding, ducking, keeping quiet, keeping small. And it hadn't protected David. It hadn't protected anybody. The only time in 12 years he'd actually changed anything was the moment he stopped being quiet and picked up a marker in a boardroom full of people laughing at him. So tomorrow he was going to walk into that building, and he was going to end it. He just didn't know yet that Kane had made a decision too. And Kane's decision didn't involve lawyers at all. The next morning, Ethan dropped Lily at school at 8:15, kissed the top of her head, watched her walk in through the front doors, with her backpack bouncing, and told her the same thing he told her every single morning of her life. "I'll be here at 3:30. You hear me? 3:30 right out front. I'll be here." "I know, Daddy," she said, like she always said, like it was the most obvious fact in the world. "You're always here." And then she was gone, swallowed up by the doors and the noise of 100 other kids. And Ethan stood there for a moment, the way he did every morning. And then he turned and walked to the bus stop and caught the number 40 downtown. And he did not know, he had no way of knowing that it would be the hardest promise he'd ever have to keep. He got to Vantage at 9:40. Rosa was at the front desk, and the second she saw him, she came around it fast, her face tight. "Ethan, thank God, listen to me." She kept her voice low. "Kane's here. He came in at 7 this morning before anybody. He's got 2 lawyers with him and a man from corporate security I've never seen before. And Ethan, She gripped his arm. He's been telling everyone who'll listen that you broke into the system, that you're the one who deleted everything. He's got some kind of report. He's naming you in it. I know, Ethan said quietly. It's okay, Rosa. I've been expecting it. There's more. Her grip tightened. The security guy he brought in. I heard him on the phone this morning when I came in. He was talking to somebody, and he said your name, and then he said, she swallowed. He said something about your daughter's school. He said Riverside Elementary. Ethan, why would Kane's people be talking about your daughter's school? And every ounce of calm Ethan Carter had walked in with drained straight out of his body. He didn't answer Rosa. He was already moving not toward the elevators, not toward Kane, but toward the front doors, his hand already digging for his phone, his heart slamming against his ribs so hard he could barely hear. Because there was only one reason a man like Kane, a man who'd lost everything, a man who couldn't beat Ethan with lawyers, would have his people asking about an 8-year-old girl's school. He was looking for the one thing Ethan couldn't afford to lose. The phone was ringing in Ethan's ear before he'd made it through the revolving door. Riverside Elementary. Ring. Ring. Pick up, he whispered. Pick up, pick up, pick up. The line clicked. And a voice that was not Karen's, a voice he did not recognize. A calm and pleasant and terrible voice said, Riverside Elementary front office. How can I help you? Where's Karen? Ethan said. His voice came out flat and hard, a voice he hadn't used in 12 years. The woman who runs the front office, Karen. Put her on the phone right now. A pause, pleasant, unhurried. I'm sorry, Sir. Karen stepped away for a moment. Can I take a message? Who am I speaking with? You're speaking with Ethan Carter. My daughter Lily is a student at that school, and you are going to walk to Miss Karen right now, or you are going to walk to the principal, and you are going to hand one of them this phone, or so help me God. Sir, there's no need for that tone. The voice was still calm, still pleasant, and that was the most frightening part. Everything here is perfectly fine. Your daughter's safe. We just have a few questions about your pickup authorization. There have been some changes to your file, and we want to make sure Lily goes home with the right person today. Ethan stopped walking. Changes to his file. There are no changes to my file, he said slowly. I'm the only authorized pickup. It's been that way since kindergarten. Her mother is dead. There is nobody else on that list. Nobody. Well, that's the thing, sir. We received an updated authorization form this morning. Added a new name. A rustle of paper. Deliberate theatrical. A family associate. Comes with all the right signatures. So you can understand our confusion. And Ethan understood everything. Kane couldn't beat him with lawyers. He couldn't beat him with the board. He couldn't wipe 14 pairs of eyes or the cash purging in an air-gapped machine. So he'd done the thing that men like him always did when they were cornered. He'd found the one thing Ethan loved more than his own life, and he'd reached for it. Listen to me very carefully, Ethan said. And now his voice wasn't hard anymore. Now it was quiet and steady, and colder than anything the man on the other end had ever heard. I don't know who you are. I don't care. But you are going to do exactly what I say. You are going to put my daughter in a room with Karen and the principal and a locked door, and you are not going to release her to anyone, no matter what paperwork they show you, no matter what name is on it, until I get there, or until the police do. Because that authorization form is forged, and the man who forged it is under investigation for corporate fraud. And if one hair on my daughter's head is out of place, there is no lawyer on earth who will keep me from you. Do you understand me? Silence on the line. Then, very quietly, the voice said, I think you're overreacting, Mr. Carter. And the line went dead. Ethan stood on the sidewalk outside Vantage Technologies, with a dead phone against his ear, and his whole world coming apart, and for one terrible second, he couldn't move. Then he moved. He turned and he ran back through the revolving doors, and Rosa was still there, and she took one look at his face and said, What? What is it? Kane's people are at my daughter's school. The words came out fast and flat. There's someone in the front office who isn't supposed to be there. They've got a forged pickup authorization. Rosa, they're trying to take Lily. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. I need police at Riverside Elementary right now, and I need to get across this city, and I don't have a car. Rosa, I don't... Call 911, now. I'll get you a car. Rosa was already on her radio, already moving. Andre, it's Rosa at the front desk. It's an emergency. I need Whitfield's car at the front entrance in 60 seconds. A child's in danger. Go. Ethan dialed 911 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and a dispatcher answered, and he heard himself giving the address. Giving Lily's name, giving Lily's description. An 8-year-old girl, brown hair, purple backpack, and the words came out of him in a rush, and the dispatcher was calm and asking questions, and Ethan was answering them, and none of it felt real. None of it because 8 hours ago, the worst thing in his life had been a CEO throwing coffee at his head, and now a stranger with a pleasant voice had his daughter in a room across the city. Sir, we're dispatching units to Riverside Elementary now, the dispatcher said. I need you to stay on the line. I can't stay on the line, I have to get there. Sir. But the elevator behind Rosa had opened, and out of it came the last person on earth Ethan expected to see. Priya Sharma, and behind her, moving fast for a man his age, Frank Whitfield. Ethan. Priya's face was white. I heard Rosa on the radio. What's happening? Kane. Ethan could barely get the word out. Kane's got someone at my daughter's school. A forged pickup form. They're trying to take her. To get to me. To make me... He couldn't finish it. I have to go. I have to go right now. And Frank Whitfield, 71 years old, chairman of the board of one of the largest technology companies in the country, did something that none of them expected. He took off running. My car? Whitfield barked over his shoulder. Both of you with me now. Priya, call the police back and give them my name, and tell them the chairman of Vantage Technologies is confirming this is credible and connected to a corporate fraud investigation that'll move them faster than a frightened father will. Ethan. You're with me in the car. Let's go. The clock in Whitfield's car read 10:04 when they pulled out of the garage. Andre drove like the devil again, but this time it was different, because this time nobody in the car said the word traffic. Nobody talked about being late, and the only sound was Ethan's breathing and Priya's voice on the phone repeating Whitfield's name and title to a police dispatcher over and over. Until finally she covered the phone and said, They've got 2 units there. They're at the school. They're inside. Ethan closed his eyes. Is she okay? Is Lily okay? Do they have eyes on her? They can't tell me that on the phone, Ethan. They just confirmed units are on scene. That's not good enough. It's the best we've got right now. Priya reached over the seat and gripped his shoulder hard. Ethan, look at me. She's in a building full of teachers who've known her for years. Karen loves that little girl you heard her yesterday. Whoever that was on the phone, they're one person in a school full of adults who would die before they let something happen to a kid. And there are cops on scene now. Hold on. Just hold on. Ethan held on. And Frank Whitfield, staring straight ahead, said quietly, This is my fault. Ethan turned. I let Kane walk out of that building yesterday, the old man said. I told him to go to his office and wait for legal. And I didn't put a single person on him because it never occurred to me. His jaw tightened. It never occurred to me that a man would do something like this. Go after a child. I've known Gregory Kane for 11 years. I promoted him. I put him on that magazine cover. And I never once saw this in him. He shook his head slowly. That's my failure. Not just yesterday. 11 years of it. I saw a man who hit his numbers, and I told myself that made him a leader. I never asked what he was willing to do to hit them. That's not the same as this, Ethan said. No, but it's the soil this grows in. Whitfield looked at him. You said something in that conference room yesterday. You said I inherited the flaw same as everybody, but that for 4 years I stood in front of the trap and told everyone who noticed it to be quiet. You were talking to Kane. But you could have been talking to me. Because I'm the one who built the culture where a man like him thrives. Where a Priya Sharma gets shut down 4 times and nobody above her asks why. Where the guy who mops the floors turns out to know more than the whole engineering department, and it takes a coffee cup to the head before anyone looks at him twice. His voice was rough. I've spent 30 years in rooms like that one, and I let them make me stupid. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Ethan's phone rang. He grabbed it. Unknown number. He answered it before it finished the first ring. Yes. Yes, this is Ethan Carter. Mr. Carter. A new voice. Older official tired. This is Officer Reyes, Officer Delgado, Riverside PD. I'm at your daughter's school. Is she okay? Is Lily okay? She's fine, sir. She's completely fine. She's sitting right here with her teacher, and she's a little confused about why there are police officers here, but she's absolutely fine. I promise you. The sound that came out of Ethan Carter was not a word. It was something between a sob and a breath, and Priya's hand tightened on his shoulder, and Whitfield closed his eyes, and in the front seat, Andre eased his foot off the accelerator for the first time in 10 minutes. There was a man, Officer Delgado went on, showed up about 40 minutes ago with paperwork saying he was authorized to pick up your daughter. Front office staff got suspicious. Apparently the head secretary, a Ms. Karen Alvarez, said in 8 years, you have never once sent anybody else, and something about the man rubbed her wrong. She told him to wait, took your daughter into the principal's office and locked the door. Then she called us. A pause. She's the reason we got here in time, Mr. Carter. That woman should get a medal. Ethan pressed the phone to his forehead. Karen. Karen with the smelly markers and the take a breath and drive safe. Karen who had said she's not going anywhere. The man, Ethan managed. Did you get him? Did you? He's in the back of a squad car right now. The forged authorization is enough to hold him, and once we started asking who sent him, he got real quiet, real fast, which tells me he's the kind of guy who's more scared of his boss than of us. A grim note entered the officer's voice. Which means his boss is somebody worth talking to. You want to tell me who that might be, Mr. Carter? And Ethan looked across the car at Frank Whitfield, and Whitfield nodded slowly. His name is Gregory Kane, Ethan said. He's the CEO of Vantage Technologies. Or he was until yesterday. He's under investigation for corporate fraud, and I'm the witness who exposed him, and I think... His voice steadied. I think he decided that if he couldn't discredit me, he'd take the one thing I care about instead. And I've got the chairman of Vantage's board sitting right here next to me, who'll confirm every word of it. There was a pause on the line. Well, Officer Delgado said, that escalates things considerably. Mr. Carter, how far out are you? Ethan looked up. Andre was pulling off the highway. The clock read 10:31. 2 minutes, he said. We'll be right here. Your daughter's asking for her dad. The car hadn't fully stopped before Ethan had the door open.
Dindy.
He was up the path in seconds past the flagpole, in through the front doors, where 2 police officers stood and a knot of teachers hovered, and then a door on the left opened, and Karen Alvarez came out, and behind her, holding Karen's hand in a purple sweatshirt with a purple backpack, was Lily. He was on his knees before she reached him. She hit him, and he wrapped both arms around her and held her so tight, she squeaked, and he pressed his face into her hair, and he did not let go, and he did not care that there were police officers watching, and teachers watching, and the chairman of a billion-dollar company standing in the doorway watching, because none of them existed. None of them had ever existed. There was only this. Only her, only the small warm weight of the only thing in the world that had ever mattered. Daddy, you're squishing me, Lily said muffled. I know, Ethan said. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Give me just one more second. Why are there police here? Did I do something bad? No. He pulled back and held her face in both hands and looked at her. Really looked at her, made sure with his own eyes that she was whole and unharmed. And here. No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything bad. You did everything right. Miss Karen did everything right. There was just a mix-up and some police officers came to help sort it out, and now it's all over. He smoothed her hair back. It's all over. Lily studied him with those serious eyes. You came in the middle of the day. You never come in the middle of the day. No, Ethan agreed. I don't. But I told you I'd always come. Didn't I? Whenever you need me. 3:30 or the middle of the day or the middle of the night. I will always, always come. I know, Lily said simply. You're always here. Yeah. And Ethan Carter, who had not cried in front of another human being since the day he buried his wife, put his forehead against his daughter's and let the tears come, and did not care who saw. He stood up eventually. Karen was standing a few feet away, and Ethan crossed to her and did something he'd never done in 8 years of pickups. He hugged her. Thank you, he said into her shoulder, and his voice broke on it. You saved her. You knew something was wrong and you locked that door and you called for help. I don't, Karen, I don't have the words. Thank you. She's one of mine, Karen said simply, patting his back. They're all mine. You think I'd hand that little girl to some stranger with a clipboard no matter what it said? She pulled back, and her eyes were wet too. 8 years I've watched you walk in that door every single day at 3:30. Rain, snow doesn't matter. You're the most reliable father I've got, and I've got 400 kids. You think I don't know a real dad when I see one? The second that man walked in and said he was picking up Lily Carter, I knew. Because Lily Carter's dad doesn't send other people. Lily Carter's dad comes himself, every time. Ethan couldn't answer. He just nodded and wiped his face and nodded again. Behind him, Officer Delgado cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, when you've got a minute, we're going to need a statement, and I've got some questions about Mr. Kane, but there's no rush. Take your time with your daughter first. Beta. And then Frank Whitfield stepped forward. He'd been standing quietly by the door the whole time, this old man in a suit worth more than the school's annual budget, and he walked over to Ethan and Lily, and he crouched down slowly with a hand on his knee, an old man's crouch until he was at Lily's eye level. Hello? He said gravely. You must be Lily. I've heard a great deal about you. I'm told you draw excellent dinosaurs. Lily looked at him with frank suspicion. Who are you? My name is Frank. I work with your dad. He glanced up at Ethan, and something passed across the old man's face, something like shame, and something like resolve. Or I should say, I'd very much like to work with your dad, if he'll have us. He did something very brave yesterday, and very brave again today, and I've been standing here for the last few minutes realizing I've spent a long time in the wrong kind of rooms, working with the wrong kind of people. He looked back at Lily. Your father is the right kind. The kind we need more of. Lily considered this. He makes really good grilled cheese? She offered. Whitfield laughed a real laugh, surprised out of him. I don't doubt it for a second. He straightened up slowly and faced Ethan, and the humor drained out of his face and left something serious behind. I was going to make you an offer tomorrow morning, Whitfield said. A job, executive. A great deal of money, a great deal of authority. I had a whole speech prepared about how much we need you and how you'd be a fool to say no. He shook his head. I'm not going to give that speech, because after what just happened, I don't have the right to ask you for anything. Kane came after your child because you told the truth in my company's boardroom. That's on me. That's on the culture I built, so I'm not going to ask you to come work for me. He paused. I'm going to ask you what it would take to make you willing to. And whatever the answer is, whatever your conditions are, however impossible they sound, the answer from me is going to be yes. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked down at Lily, who had already lost interest in the adults and was digging in her backpack for the grape-scented markers to show Frank her stegosaurus. And Ethan Carter, who 12 years ago had walked away from exactly this, the money, the title, the room felt, the ground shift under him. Because Cain had been so sure. The second you take it, you become one of us. Cain had bet everything on Ethan walking away. Cain had been so certain that a good man couldn't survive in that room that he'd tried to take Ethan's daughter rather than let him try. And standing in the front office of Riverside Elementary with his daughter safe in front of him and the man who'd tried to take her sitting in a squad car outside Ethan, understood finally what he had to do. He wasn't going to walk away this time. He was going to walk in. And he was going to change the room from the inside so that no Priya Sharma ever got shut down 4 times again, so that no David Reyes ever died because 90 days was too expensive, so that no father ever got a phone call with a pleasant, terrible voice on the other end. "I've got conditions," Ethan said quietly. Whitfield met his eyes. "Name them." "Joe." And Ethan opened his mouth to name the first one. The one that mattered more than any salary, any title, any share of stock. The one that had been the entire architecture of his life for 12 years. But before he could say a single word, Officer Delgado's radio crackled, and a voice came through it sharp and urgent, and every head in the room turned, because what the voice said made the officer's face change completely. "All units be advised. The subject in custody just gave up a name, Gregory Cain, and we just tried to bring Cain in at the Vantage building." A pause, staticky and tense. "He's gone. He cleared out his office an hour ago. Nobody's seen him since. And he left something behind on his desk addressed to Ethan Carter." The room went still. Ethan looked down at Lily, who was holding up her stegosaurus for Frank Whitfield to admire blissfully, unaware that the man who had tried to take her had just vanished into a city of 8 million people, leaving behind an envelope with her father's name on it. And Ethan made a decision in that half-second that he would make 1,000 times over the coming weeks, whatever was in that envelope, whatever Cain had left behind, it was not going to touch this. It was not going to touch her. "Officer," Ethan said quietly, "I'll come make my statement. I'll look at whatever he left, but not here, not in front of my daughter. Give me an hour to get her somewhere safe first." Delgado nodded slowly. "That's fair. We've got the man who came for her in custody, and we've got units watching the school. She's safe. But I understand." He glanced at Lily, then back at Ethan. "Take your hour." And so Ethan took his hour. He took Lily out to Whitfield's car, and he buckled her into the back seat himself, checking the strap twice, the way he hadn't checked it since she was a toddler. And Andre drove them slowly. This time carefully to Priya Sharma's apartment, because Priya had offered it before anyone even asked. Because Priya had a spare room and a doorman and a building Cain's people had never heard of. "I'll stay with her," Priya said, crouching down to Lily's level in the lobby. "You go do what you have to do. I've got a whole cabinet full of snacks I'm not supposed to eat, and I bet you can help me eat them." Lily looked up at her dad. "Are you coming back?" "Chinikas." And Ethan crouched down too, and he took her face in his hands, and he said the truest thing he had ever said. "I will always come back. There is no place in this world I could ever go that would keep me from coming back to you. You understand? Not ever." "I know," Lily said. And then because she was 8, and because the whole terrifying morning had already slid off her like water off a duck, "Can I have the orange snacks?" "You can have all the orange snacks," Priya said solemnly, and took her hand and led her toward the elevator, and Lily went without looking back the way children do when they feel safe. The way children only do when they have never once in their lives had a reason to doubt that the person who promised to come back would come back. Ethan watched the elevator doors close. Then he turned to Whitfield. "Take me to the office," he said. "Let's see what he left me."
Dimmy.
Gregory Cain's office looked exactly the way it had the morning before, when Ethan had emptied the trash and looked at the magazine cover on the wall. The Man Who Reinvented Safety. The cover was still there. Cain had left it. That told Ethan something. A man running for his life doesn't leave the trophy on the wall unless he wants it found, unless leaving it is part of the message. On the desk, dead center, sat a single white envelope. Ethan Carter, in black ink, in a hard, slashing hand. 2 police officers stood by the window. Delgado was there, and a detective in plainclothes, and Whitfield, and a lawyer from Vantage's legal department. They'd photographed the envelope, dusted it, done whatever it was they did. Now they were waiting for Ethan. "You don't have to open it," Delgado said. "We can do it. It's evidence now." "No." Ethan picked it up. It was light, 1 sheet, maybe 2. He addressed it to me. Whatever he wanted to say it to me. Let me hear it. He opened it. It was 1 page, handwritten. And Ethan read it standing up in the middle of Kane's enormous office, with a room full of people watching his face. "Carter, by the time you read this, I'll be somewhere you can't reach. Don't waste your time. I've had money moving out of the country for 2 years. A man in my position always keeps an exit. So this isn't a confession, and it isn't a surrender. Consider it a last lesson from a better man to a lesser one.
Geçemi.
You think you won. You saved your 200 people and your precious data centers, and you got your little girl back, and now Whitfield's going to give you my chair. Congratulations. But here's what you don't understand, and what you're going to spend the rest of your life learning. I was you once, 20 years ago. I was the one who saw the flaw nobody else saw. I was the one who told the truth in the room full of people who didn't want to hear it. And you know what it got me? Nothing. It got me passed over. It got me labeled difficult. So I learned. I learned that the truth is a currency, and the men who spend it go broke, and the men who hoard it get rich. You're going to sit in my chair now, and you're going to tell yourself you'll be different. You'll keep your promises. You'll protect the little people. You'll leave every day at 3:30 for your daughter, and for a while you will. But the room changes you, Carter. It changed me, and it'll change you because the room only knows one language, and it isn't integrity. Give it 5 years. Give it 10. And then look in the mirror and see whose face is looking back.
Yeah.
I didn't send that man to hurt your daughter. I want you to know that. I sent him to scare you, to make you understand that everyone has a pressure point, and yours has a purple backpack. That was the lesson. Consider it delivered. You'll never sit in that chair without thinking of me. GK. Ethan read it twice. Then he set it down on the desk very carefully, and for a long moment he said nothing at all. "Mr. Carter," the detective said, "anything in there we can use? Any indication where he's headed?" "He says he's got money offshore," Ethan said. "Says he's been planning an exit for 2 years. Says you won't find him." He looked up. "But he wrote it by hand on his own desk, and he left his fingerprints all over it, and he all but admitted he sent a man to my daughter's school. So maybe he's not as smart as he thinks he is." "We'll get him," Delgado said. "Guys like this always trip. They can't help it. Ego's too big."
Mates.
But Ethan was still looking at the letter. And the truth was, he wasn't thinking about whether they'd catch Kane. He was thinking about the last line. "You'll never sit in that chair without thinking of me." And he was thinking about the line before it. The room changes you. Because the terrible thing, the thing that made Ethan's stomach turn, was that Kane wasn't entirely wrong. Kane had told the truth once in a room full of people who didn't want it, and the room had broken him. 20 years ago, Gregory Kane might have been a decent man. The room had made him into something that could send a stranger to a child's school and call it a lesson. And Ethan was about to walk into that same room. Whitfield seemed to read his face. "He's trying to poison it for you," the old man said quietly. "That's what the letter is. He knows he's beaten. He knows he's running, so his last move is to make sure that even in victory you can't enjoy it. He wants you to sit in that chair and doubt yourself. Don't give it to him, Ethan. Don't let a coward's letter decide who you're going to be. He's not entirely wrong, though." Ethan's voice was low. "The room does change people. I've seen it. I watched it happen to a whole company 12 years ago. What makes me so sure it won't happen to me?" And it was Priya who answered, except Priya wasn't there. Priya was across the city eating orange snacks with his daughter, and so it was the memory of what Priya had said the day before that answered surfacing in his mind, clear as a bell. You didn't do this to feel like a somebody. You did it because 200 people in this building have kids they pick up from school. Ethan looked at Whitfield. You asked me yesterday what it would take to make me willing to sit in that chair, he said. You said whatever my conditions were, the answer would be yes. Did you mean that? Every word. Then here they are. Ethan straightened up. And I want them in writing. I want them in my contract. I want them enforceable so that when the room tries to change me, and it will try, there's something in ink that Gregory Kane's ghost can't argue with. Name them, Whitfield said, and Ethan named them. First, I leave every day at 3:30, not most days, not when it's convenient. Every day. Because my daughter comes out of school at 3:30, and I have been standing outside those doors every single day for 8 years, and no board meeting, no launch, no crisis, no billion-dollar anything is ever going to change that. If a meeting runs past 3, it runs without me. Put it in the contract. Done, Whitfield said. Second, family comes before the company, mine and everyone else's. If an engineer's kid is sick, they go home and nobody makes them feel it. If someone needs to be at a funeral or a recital or a hospital, they go, and there's no penalty, no black mark, no quiet resentment. Because I watched a company treat people like they existed to serve the work, and I watched what that did to them, and I'm not building that. Not ever again. Done. Third, no executive, not me, not you, not anyone ever silences an employee who raises a legitimate safety concern. Ever. Priya Sharma got shut down 4 times. 4 times she was right, and 4 times a man with a bigger title told her to be quiet, and it almost killed 200 people. That ends. Anyone in this company, from the newest junior engineer to the guy who mops the floors, can raise their hand and say, "This is dangerous," and they will be heard, and they will be protected, and if any executive punishes them for it, that executive is gone. I don't care how many numbers they hit. Put it in ink. Done. Whitfield's voice had gone rough. God help me that one should have been in ink 11 years ago. Fourth. Ethan paused, and this was the one that mattered most. The one that was really about David Reyes, about a man dead in a server hall 12 years gone. Experience and integrity matter more than titles and ego. I want a formal process. When someone raises a technical or safety concern, it gets evaluated on the merits, on whether they're right, not on who they are or what they're paid. The best idea wins, even if it comes from the bottom. Especially if it comes from the bottom. Because the man who could have saved this company was cleaning its toilets for 2 years, and nobody looked at him twice until he was standing at the head of a boardroom, and I never want this company to be that blind again. The room was silent. Those are my conditions, Ethan said. That's the whole list. No salary demand. No stock demand. I don't care about any of that. Give me enough to raise my daughter and I'm fine. But those 4 things go in the contract, and they're not negotiable, and they don't have expiration dates. That's what it takes to get me in the chair. Frank Whitfield looked at him for a long, long moment. And then the old man did something that none of the officers or lawyers in that room expected. He extended his hand. "Mr. Carter," he said, "on behalf of the Board of Vantage Technologies, I accept every one of your conditions. And I'll tell you something, I've hired 40 executives in my career. Presidents, CFOs, chief officers of every stripe. Every single one of them, the first thing they negotiated was their own compensation. Their salary, their equity, their golden parachute. You're the first man who ever sat across from me and negotiated for everyone but himself." He gripped Ethan's hand. "That's how I know Kane's letter is wrong. The room doesn't change everybody. It only changes the ones who walk in wanting something for themselves. You walked in wanting something for other people. The room's got nothing to offer a man like that. Nothing it can use against you." Ethan shook his hand, and for the first time since he'd read Kane's letter, the knot in his stomach loosened. They caught Gregory Kane 11 days later. He'd been right about the money he did have. Accounts offshore, he had been planning an exit for years. But he'd been wrong about the important thing, the thing men like him were always wrong about. He thought he was smarter than everyone. And smart men who think they're smarter than everyone always make the one mistake they're sure they'd never make. Kane's mistake was the letter. Tour, because in the letter he'd admitted in his own handwriting on his own stationery that he had sent a man to Riverside Elementary. "I didn't send that man to hurt your daughter. I sent him to scare you." He'd meant it as a taunt, a final twist of the knife. Instead, it was a signed confession to attempted child abduction and criminal intimidation. And when the man in the squad car started talking, and the forged authorization form got matched to a printer in Kane's home office, and the offshore transfers got traced by a forensic accountant the FBI put on it, the case against Gregory Kane stopped being about corporate fraud and became about something a great deal worse. They found him in a rented villa in a country with a shaky extradition treaty, and it took the lawyers 4 months, but the treaty held, and they brought him home in handcuffs. Ethan didn't go to the airport. He didn't go to the arraignment. Priya offered to drive him, and he said no. "You don't want to see it?" she asked. "After everything he did, you don't want to watch them walk him in?" "No," Ethan said, and he meant it. Kane spent his whole life needing to be in the room where things happened, needing to be seen, needing to matter more than everyone else. The worst thing I can do to him, the only real punishment, is to not think about him at all. He wanted me to sit in that chair and think of him every day. So I'm going to sit in that chair and forget he ever existed. That's how he loses. Not in a courtroom. In my head. By not being there. Priya looked at him for a moment. "You know, most people would want to watch. Most people didn't spend 12 years learning that revenge doesn't bring anybody back." Ethan's voice was quiet. "David Reyes is still gone. Chasing Kane down and gloating over him doesn't change that. The only thing that honors David is making sure it never happens again. And I can't do that from a courtroom gallery. I can only do it from that chair. So that's where I'll be." The chair changed him in the end, but not the way Kane predicted. The first month. Ethan Carter walked into the executive suite in a suit that didn't fit right, and shoes that pinched, and half the building didn't know what to make of him. The janitor who'd become the boss. The ghost story made real. There were executives who resented him. There were VPs who'd built their careers on the culture Kane had made, who looked at Ethan's 4 conditions in the employee handbook and saw a threat, and some of them fought him, and some of them left, and a few of them tried to wait him out, certain he'd flame out or sell out or simply forget. He didn't forget. At 3:30 every single afternoon, no matter what was happening, no matter who was in his office, no matter what fire was burning, Ethan Carter stood up, put on his coat, and left. The first time it happened, during a meeting with 3 board members and a major investor. The room went silent as he rose. "We're not finished," the investor said, half annoyed, half amused, sure the new man would sit back down. "You're not finished," Ethan agreed, pulling on his coat. "I am. It's 3:30. My daughter gets out of school." He nodded at Whitfield. "Frank can walk you through the rest. He knows the numbers better than I do anyway. You're walking out of a meeting with, do you know who this is?" "I do." Ethan buttoned his coat. "And with all respect, sir, he'll still be a very wealthy man tomorrow whether I stay another hour or not. But my daughter only gets one childhood, and I only get to be the dad who shows up if I actually show up. It's in my contract. Page 1. Ask Frank." And he walked out. The investor was furious. For about a week. And then something strange happened. The thing that Ethan had bet his whole tenure on, people started to trust him. Because a man who will walk out on a billionaire to pick up his kid is a man who cannot be bought, and a man who cannot be bought is a man whose word means something, and in a building where nobody's word had meant anything for 11 years, that turned out to be worth more than any launch. Priya Sharma became his chief technology officer. The first thing she did was build the safety review process. Ethan had put in his conditions, a system where anyone at any level could flag a concern and have it evaluated on the merits anonymously if they wanted, with real protection behind it. In the first year, that process caught 9 flaws before they ever reached production. 9. Any one of which could have been another Meridian. The engineers who'd mocked the janitor at the head of the boardroom, the ones who'd stopped taking notes and started listening, became some of his fiercest defenders. Because Ethan did the thing that Cain had never done, the thing that David Reyes had died wishing someone would do. He listened. When the newest junior engineer raised a hand in a meeting, Ethan stopped and listened, really listened, the way no one had listened to him for 2 years while he pushed a cart down the 17th floor hallway. And word got around, and the ideas started coming. From the bottom, from the middle, from the people who'd spent years being told to be quiet. Innovation accelerated. Not because Ethan was a genius, though he was, though the industry that had blacklisted him 12 years ago now begged him for interviews, but because for the first time in a decade, 2,000 people at Vantage Technologies were allowed to be smart out loud. Customer trust came back. The launch that Cain had almost pushed live, the one that would have burned down 3 data centers, relaunched a year later. Done right, done safe, and it worked flawlessly. Profits recovered, and then they didn't just recover, they climbed past anything the company had ever done. Because it turned out that a company where people weren't afraid was a company that could do remarkable things. The magazine that had once put Gregory Cain on its cover called Ethan for an interview. He turned them down. They called again. He turned them down again. The third time the reporter asked why, and Ethan said the only quote they ever got out of him, the one that ran under a photo of an empty executive office at 3:31 in the afternoon. "The last man you put on your cover tried to have my daughter taken from a school. I'm not interested in your cover. I'm interested in my kid. You want a story? Go write about the secretary at Riverside Elementary who locked a door and made a phone call. She's the hero, not me. I just showed up." 2 years after the morning he'd thrown a coffee cup, Gregory Cain was sentenced. Meng, fraud. Attempted child abduction. Criminal intimidation. Witness tampering. The offshore money got clawed back, most of it going into a fund that Ethan insisted be set up in David Reyes' name. A fund for the families of engineers and technicians killed on the job. The people, the industry forgot the people who died in server halls and on factory floors while executives got magazine covers. Cain went to prison. He'd been so sure he was smarter than everyone. He'd been so sure the room only spoke one language. And in the end, the thing that put him away was the same thing he'd spent his whole life betraying: the truth, written down in his own hand, because he couldn't resist one last chance to feel superior. Ethan never visited him, never wrote back, never gave him a single thought he didn't have to. The chair didn't change Ethan Carter. Ethan Carter changed the chair. Baum and Lily. Lily grew. She turned 9, and then 10, and then 11. She stopped drawing stegosauruses and started drawing cities, intricate ones with bridges and towers. And Ethan put every single one on the refrigerator until there was no more room. And then he started putting them on the walls of his enormous office, until the office that had once held a magazine cover of a lying man now held a gallery of a little girl's imagined cities. And every single afternoon at 3:30, no matter what, Ethan Carter walked out of that building. Sometimes there was a crisis. Sometimes there was a board member mid-sentence. Sometimes there was a launch, or an investor, or a reporter, or a problem that seemed like the most important thing in the world. And every single time he stood up and he put on his coat and he left. Because he had learned the thing that Gregory Cain never learned. The thing that David Reyes had died trying to teach a company that wouldn't listen, the thing that had been true from the very first morning when a man in worn coveralls picked a marker up off a boardroom floor. The most important room in the world was never the boardroom. It was the sidewalk outside an elementary school at 3:30 in the afternoon. And Ethan Carter was always there. He was there the day Lily graduated 5th grade, standing in the back in a suit, clapping harder than anyone. He was there the day she came home crying about a mean girl in her class, and he made grilled cheese and listened, and didn't try to fix it, just listened because he'd finally learned that listening was the whole job. He was there for the science fair and the school play and the terrible violin recital and the first day she rode her bike without training wheels, wobbling down the sidewalk while he ran behind her, his hand hovering an inch from the seat, ready to catch her, always ready to catch her. And on the afternoon of her 12th birthday, Lily Carter looked up from the city she was drawing, a real city now, with a data center in it, and a little stick figure outside, a little school waiting. And she said, "Dad, why do you always leave work at 3:30? Some of my friends' parents don't get home till dark." And Ethan Carter set down his coffee, and he looked at his daughter, and he told her the truth. "Because a long time ago," he said, "before you were even born, I made your mom a promise. She was very sick, and she was scared not for herself, but for you. She was scared you'd grow up without somebody who always showed up. And I promised her that no matter what happened, no matter what job I had, or how important anybody told me it was, I would be the one thing in your life you never had to wonder about. That you'd always know, always 100%, no doubt about it, that your dad was coming. That your dad was there." His voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. "I've broken a lot of things in my life, Lily. I've failed at a lot of things. But I have never once, not one single day, broken that promise. And I never will." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she got up, and she came around the table, and she hugged her father the way she'd hugged him in the front office of Riverside Elementary 4 years earlier, tight and fierce and complete. "I know," she said into his shoulder. "You're always here." And that was the truth. That was the whole truth, the only truth that had ever mattered, the truth that no boardroom or magazine cover or offshore account or letter from a broken man could ever touch. Ethan Carter had walked into the biggest building in the country as a man everyone ignored, and he had walked out as the man who saved it. The newspapers called him a genius. The industry called him a legend. 2,000 employees called him the best boss they'd ever had. But none of that was the victory. The victory was smaller than all of it and bigger than all of it, and it happened every single afternoon on a quiet sidewalk, when a little girl came running out of a pair of doors and into the arms of a father who had promised he would always be there, and always, always was.